First of all, I would like to thank the Center of Libertarian Studies and the university for allowing me to be here.
Deseo dar las gracias al Centro de Estudios Libertarios y a la universidad por permitirme estar acá.
The truth is that I always say that my experience is a type 2 error.
Que mi experiencia es el error tipo 2.
I mean, a type 1 error is one everyone does well and they do badly, and I am a singer a type 2 error. And this confirms it, because the truth is that I did everything wrong and this was not planned by me. The truth is that, in general, economists are not popular people. Moreover, in my case, I'm a mathematical economist, a specialist in growth, with and without money. The truth is that there are lots of nerds inside the academy, which is also much more difficult. And in the particular case of where I come from, which is Argentina, a country of nerds. The truth is that clearly, if I were a Chilean, I would also applaud and say, at least takes learn from the experience of these idiots who are drowning in so much red that they are. So, basically, the presentation that I am going to give, I describe it as a love story.
Básicamente la presentación que voy a dar, yo lo describo como...
Although they do not believe it. In general, they believe that economists do not have hearts. It is a lie. I mean, we do have hearts, and if we are liberals, we also have a better heart than the nerds. Basically, the first thing that happens when one studies economics and begins to see the economic systems. At the time I migrated, there was an area called comparative economic systems. I do not know if it exists here, but at least in Argentina they took it out. It is incredible because they took it out after the wall fell and crushed the nerds. But education became more socialist. It is a truly rare thing. It is as if the opposite had happened in the facts. But, well, those are the problems of a country that systematically sinks, like it is Argentina. But the central point is that the first thing that impresses you and shakes you is the power of capitalism in generating productivity and associated with it. Let's say the fall of poverty. That is a very strong story. It is very shocking. I mean, seeing the achievements of humanity in the last 200 years. That is to say, since the arrival of capitalism, which is neither more nor less than an institutional revolution, the revolution of private property. But of course, when one begins to work on that idea of productivity and achievements, the socialists take refuge in the issue of inequality. They say, no, but the system is unequal, it is deeply unequal. It generates absolutely intolerable inequalities. So, the second instance that leads one to study this is a discussion of values. That is to say, what are the values of socialism and what are the values of capitalism? Because obviously, if there is a question in which, let's say, it seems that the socialists have imposed themselves. It is in a way that the socialists have imposed themselves. It seems that the socialists have imposed themselves. It is an imposing a moral criterion, an ethical criterion. That is, that they are morally above what capitalism is. And certainly the liberals have generally abandoned that discussion because the empirical evidence is so strong that it is almost like saying, this discussion has no meaning in the light of the facts. However, that was what allowed socialism to go astray and contaminate the blood of society. So, the second part of this talk has to do with the values of capitalism, and that good people could not adhere to the socialist ideal. Because the values they have are truly immovable. They declare one thing, but the reality involves truly aberrant questions. Therefore, my second phase of love with this free market system, with a free company, in reality is that, in addition, in the plane of values, it is also a system superior to socialism. And as if all this were little, we are also superior aesthetically. Therefore, let's say the talk is going, let's say, to pass through these lanes, which are the three stages, through which I fell in love with the ideas of freedom. You here have, as it has evolved in the last 200 years, the conditions of extreme poverty on planet Earth is sometimes in the debates that I have to participate in, which is obviously an almost caricature version of myself. But the debate has to go and I give it. That is at a risk of being caricaturized. And the central point is that the natural condition of man was poverty. That is, sometimes there are some who say, no, we have to explain poverty. No, clan, no. Sorry, that would be silly. Later we will do the relevant translations. So what they say is say no, because we have to explain poverty. No, that is the natural condition of man. So what we have to explain is this wonder, which is in the last 200 years, how poverty fell extremely. Think that by 1810 the world had 1 billion inhabitants. And the people who lived with the equivalent of less than $1 a day were 95% of the people. That is, the natural condition of man was poverty. Today that number is less than 5%. That is, in a world where 7,250 million human beings live today. And the opposite of this is that there was an explosion of productivity. Let's say, truly impressive. And this is also very interesting. Why? Because when you meet guys like Piketty, who cooked the numbers, cut the series intentionally to show other things. In reality, what is the opposite of this is a world that grows phenomenally. Notice that there you have the evolution of the GDP per capita throughout the last 2,000 years. This is in a work by Angus Madison. There are 2 books by Madison about these things. One called Millennium Economy and the other which is from 0 to 2030. And basically see that the natural condition of man was poverty until capitalism arrived. And there is a phenomenal explosion of GDP per capita. What you have is that in those 2,000 years, GDP per capita multiplied by 12.9 times. However, in the first 1800 years, there was only a growth of 40%, and it concentrated shortly after the discovery of America. Whereas in the last 200 years, there was an explosion of wealth almost 9 times more. That also, for me, to tell this story of the fall of poverty and that way of evolving GDP per capita. That was what made me, for example, stop being a recalcitrant neoclassic and become an Austrian. Because, let's say, think that I gave microeconomics classes for more than 20 years. And the interesting thing is that when one studies microeconomics, or the theory of prices, as I want to say, that is, the growing yields are associated with the monopolies, and supposedly the monopolies are bad. So how could one explain that something that was bad? Because there they have clearly the growing yields. Because there the population also multiplied by more than 7 times in the last 200 years. How can it be that something that is so bad according to the neoclassic economic theory, could generate so much fall of poverty and so much well-being. And that, for me, let's say, as I dedicated myself to the issues of growth in the last 10 years, that led me to meet Murray Rothbard, an article called Monopoly and Competence. And I remember reading it, and while I was reading it, I said, I've been cheating on my students for so many years. Yes, I say it's funny, but you don't know how hard it is to face that situation. And in fact, let's say it happened to me with colleagues, that we were friends and we stopped being friends because they couldn't make the upgrade. I mean, sometimes one invests a lot in something and realizes that it has been wrong. There's not a minor issue. But aside from that, I want to tell you this fabulous story. Look at the evolution of the growth rate. Look at what the growth rate is in the first 1800 years of this series that we have brought for medicine. In times of GDP per capita, GDP per capita grew by 0.2%. That is, growth was practically imperceptible. I say this to contrast the things that Piketty says, or what the theories of secular stagnation say, especially, let's say, the one who leads that group, called Robert Gordon. See that later, with the arrival of the Industrial Revolution, the growth rate almost multiplies by 33 times. It jumps to 0.65. Then, in the first part of the 20th century, the growth rate accelerates to 1.6%. In the second part, it accelerates again to 2.1%. And in what has been going on since the 21st century, we are at 3%. In addition, there are also works that show that national accounts usually underestimate the effect of technological progress, and that could be almost 1.25% of growth. Therefore, I do not ask you to believe me that this will continue to accelerate. At least we could have the resources to maintain it constantly. And if that were the case, and we managed to maintain the growth per capita, that's say already corrected by technological progress, around 4.2% throughout a century, we would be multiplying GDP per capita by 60 times. That is to say that throughout a century, we would be achieving 4.6 times what we achieved over the course of 20 centuries. Therefore, we do not know what the future will be like. The only thing we know is that it will be much better, and that contrasts strongly with divisions of other economists. And clearly, they have ideas. For example, Piketty, that the only thing they take for granted is the destruction of this wonderful system. On the other hand, an alternative way to see this growth process is the amount of time it took to duplicate GDP per capita throughout history. And if you look at the first 18 centuries, we're in about 3,500 years to be able to duplicate GDP per capita. If we take the 19th century, we are 107 years. In the first part of the 20th century, 66, then 33, then 23 years. That is to say, what one is seeing is a process of acceleration of economic growth. Sir, in fact, if you take the list of those countries that were doubling GDP per capita income throughout history, you will find that, for example, the first country that achieved it was England, then the United States achieved it, and then they achieved it in different countries. The last one that achieved it was China. And what you're seeing is there, over time, as they move forward towards the present, the amount of years it took to double GDP per capita was getting smaller. That is to say, those of you are facing a process of acceleration of growth. So the question is, what is behind this grave process? So what one finds is that not all economies are doing well in the same way. There are some that are doing better, and there are others that are doing worse. And what you see is that Those economies which are freer grow more than twice the ones that are repressed. And that is not a minor issue. Like, I will give you an example that comes to mind in order to understand the dimensions of the damage that can be caused with politics. There was a study that reveals that those countries that have inflation rates above 20% lose 1.58% of growth per year. If one takes the experience of Argentina with a central bank and computes the differential of last growth rate, if it had not been for that, Argentina today would have a similar GDP to that of the United States. And yet, it is a country that is increasingly poorer. It is a country of average income on the way to becoming poor. So these differences that seem small, but in a long time interval, make great differences. And that can be seen in the next film. That has to do with what the GDP per capita is. And here, sees that those countries that offer yet have a GDP per capita almost 8 times larger than those that are repressed. That is to say, it is no longer just a matter of rate, but certain dynamics. It is a number that truly makes a difference. And I ask you to also remember the number at the least free wages, close to $5,500. Why? Because in the next film, what we have there is the income, at the lowest income of distribution. Those who are in the lowest income, poorest, in the free countries, are 11 times richer than those who are in the lowest income of the oppressed countries. But not only that, but those who live in the free countries have an income per capita that is twice that of the average citizen of the repressed country. And that is not a minor issue, because if there is something that is proven empirically, the distribution of income follows a format similar to what would be a square or a normal law, that is, distributions where fashion or fashion is below the average, or in some way, this is not right. Right? So, deep down, what this is telling me is that it seems better to be a lion's tail than a masses head, and the difference is substantial. That is, even those who are to lie much better in a free country than in a repressed country. Why? Because given that format of distribution of income, between 70 and 80% as a population have a lower income than the average income. Consequently, even those who are poor in a free country are much better than the vast majority, the inhabitants of the repressed country. So the question is, how can it be that this is not attractive in itself, that this empirical evidence is not sufficient? Moreover, if you look at the countries that are free, they have 24 times less than the poor ones. So the question is, where is the business of not embracing the ideas of freedom? Because I say empirical evidence is too forceful, let's say, and that is why, let's say, the socialists refuse the debate, let's say. Why? Because the numbers are too forceful. So the question is, and what is it that sustains the system that generates so much, but so much wealth? Basically, the institutions of capitalism are 5. Let's say that they are private property, free markets, competition, division of labor, social cooperation. Clearly, let's say, Although each of these has its own entity, some of them work together. For example, private property works with free markets, and, for example, division of labor works with social cooperation. Private property has to do with the fact that you can control assets. That is, that you can be the owner of something. And this, let's say, what does it have to do with free markets? Free markets means that there will be no intervention. That is, there will be no state intervention. There will be no violent action by a corrector interfering in the transactions. Basically, what capitalism works on is the idea of voluntary exchanges. And here is where these two institutions work together. You have, when there is a transaction where the exchanges are free, they appear if you want. On the one hand, the free exchanges, that is, voluntary exchanges, and on the other side, money appears. Say a person delivers a good and in exchange receives money. What that does is mark a price. That is, it is a historical record of a transaction. That is the price. And that becomes a signal. And that signal is transmitted to the rest of the system. And with that signal, the agents begin to make decisions. Some will decide to sell, others will decide to buy. It is a discovery process. Surely, there will not be full coincidence at the beginning. What will happen? New opportunities will begin to be discovered, and adjustments will take place. This is how the market system works. So the transaction is done, a historical record is generated, call price, the information is sent to the system. The agents take that information, they make decisions with that, and when the offer and demand do not coincide, adjustments are generated. So, see that there are several elements about which these two institutions are very important. Because if you would not own this, or the good that you're selling, you do not value it correctly and you would be delivering correctly. Surely I would be willing to sell his shoes at a much cheaper price than what he would do, because he basically knows how hard it was for him to make those shoes. So I would not deliver it in an exchange like that, because yes, so without property, and that is where socialism crumbles. If you are not owners of the thing, you cannot generate prices. By not generating prices, you cannot do economic calculation. And since you did not generate prices, the signals do not flow to the system. So the system is disordered. It cannot work. There is no way to coordinate it if it is not used violent. That is why, let's say, the idea of free markets, that is where the transactions are voluntary, that is where the rector organ comes from. Because look at the situation. What does the businessman do? Actually, we are all businessmen, but suddenly there is someone, he lacks a certain property, and there is another one who has too much. The one who has too much does not value in the minimum, but he is not connected with the other. So what happened? There, a possibility of business is created, and there is someone who discovers it, and who wants to buy it cheap. The one who has enough resources, and sell it. One of the things that socialism does is to block that information. By blocking that information, there is no way to create it. There is no way to discover it. There is no way to coordinate the system. And there is more. Not only is that problem, but also, as you know, people who are persecuted, and if necessary, by the collective, they are going to be murdered. So let's say they have no incentive to discover anything. case is not something that they discover something and they end up dead. So less information is created and much less information is discovered. All information that is fundamental for the functioning of the economic system. The third institution is competition, but this has to be clear that the institution of competition is not what we study in the manuals of neoclassical economy, in a microeconomics manual, or let's see, Hayek said that it was, let's say, I am going to adapt it to my words, that the perfect competition model was stupid because the perfect competition model had anything but competition. If they were all acceptable prices, it was a stupid model. So, and that, let's say, in Adam Smith, this is clear, and in the Austrians, it is also clear that the idea of competition does not have to do with a large amount, with atomistic agents, as it would be called in a traditional microeconomics, but it has to do with what is a free entry and exit, a concept that was raised by William James Bummel to develop the theory of disputable markets. That is what mattered to achieve the social optimum was the free entry and exit. Now, the point is the following. Why, let's say, the neoclassics come to that idea? Actually, they clung to that idea because of a question that has to do with the optimum of Pareto. If you, let's say, decide a set of production with marginal performance of growth, SEA, associated with them, I'm going to find mid-cost curves in the form of U, then you could look at the cost of a certain amount of plants. That is what also gives rise to the concept of cost utility. How many companies enter an industry, and you will realize that if you have mid-cost functions in the form, if you what will determine if they go from one company to two, has to do with where the mid-cost curves of one plant and of two plants. So the maximum of efficiency is given just by that point where those T curves coincide. Since that is a fixed number, finite when the number of companies tends to n, or when n tends to infinity, that number is distributed in n, that if it tends to infinity, it becomes zero and you reach the efficiency. That is to say, all the discussion of the wall in the background has a problem linked to a mathematical structure. In addition, and all that discussion, if I put myself in the model of Adam Smith, characterized by the factory of pins and the invisible hand, basically what did the neoclassics do? They threw at the edge the idea of the pin factory, that is, the growing yield, and they stayed with the idea of the invisible hand, but in the world version, which is an aberration. Since I am in the background, I will explain why I consider that the optimal of the wall is an aberration. For those who are not informed, I tell you, suppose that you have a situation where the economy is at a certain point. If you can make an improvement without harming someone, that is going to be called a world improvement. That is, you are not in the optimal. When there's possibilities of improvement are exhausted, you are precisely in the optimal of the wall. That is, you cannot improve someone without harming another. Basically, that would be the idea. So let's see why this idea is aberration. I ask you a question. What do you think happened to the candle makers? Did they Edison invented the lamp? If they could, they would fill them with kicks. I mean, if they had been for 50 years, at least without being able to sit down. However, we all use electric lights. Yes, but now I'm going to put an example, a little more violent. So let's say we are getting hot. Yes, they want to. Let's suppose the
Supongamos
following.
lo siguiente.
Someone appears
Aparece
Yes.
alguien, ¿sí?
who creates the
que crea
pill
la pastilla que
that
cura
cures
todo
all
lo que
ills,
es,
and we can become
y podemos llegar a ser
eternal in the state
eternos en el estado que
that we
nosotros
want.
querramos. Que
How
fuera
ugly
así.
to say state,
Digamos,
but let's say we can choose what age to live in
podemos
these
elegir en qué edad vivir
eternally young
y,
and everything like that.
y eternamente
We are not going to
jóvenes
laugh.
y todo así.
That hair,
No va a faltar el pelotudo
that in the name of the
que en
optimum
nombre del óptimo de
of
Pareto
Pareto is going to
"Che,
say,
pero
but the
los
coffin
fabricantes de
manufacturers
cajones para muertos
for the
van a
dead are going
quebrar".
to break. So
Entonces,
it is free to
es
see
para que lo vean lo violento
how
que puede
violent it can
ser. O
be.
sea, ¿qué le van a poner
They're
en
going
contra
to
al que creó
impose
esta pastilla?
who
Que
created
se
this
van a
pill.
desincentivar
They're going to
esa actividad.
disincentivize
O sea,
that
eso es lo
activity.
que hace el burócrata.
That is what the
Ellos
bureaucrat
condenan
does.
a la muerte.
They condemn us to
La
death.
intervención del
The
Estado
intervention of the
condena a
state
la muerte.
condemns to death.
Es decir,
They are the
porque
first
son los primeros en decir,
to say
no,
no,
se va a generar.
but
¿Cuántas
it is
veces
going to be
habrán
generated.
escuchado?
How
No,
many
porque la
times have you heard,
tecnología genera
no,
desempleos.
because
Esto
technology
se llama la
is called the
falacia
play for
digital.
fallacy.
Esto en un
This in a
libro de
book by
Javier
Hazlitt.
los trataba
I already
quizás
treated
mediados de
them
la década
there
del 50,
in the middle of the
un libro
50s
que se llama La
in a
economía
book called The
neutral.
Economy.
Hay
In
un
one
artículo
lesson,
que
there
se
is
llama
an
Odio la
article
máquina.
called Hate the
Ahora yo les hago
Machine.
una pregunta.
Now I'll ask you a
Si en
question.
el año
If in the year 1810,
1810
1,000 million people lived on planet Earth, if technology, which is what is characterized technological progress in the last 200 years, were unemployment, and today there are 7,250 million people on planet Earth, someone began to think that if it were true, today the unemployment rate would be 85%, which nobody thinks, because it is a mess, the size of a house. I mean, they don't even with an order of magnitudes. I mean, the truth is that they say that. Those who have had the opportunity to meet Milton Friedman say that when the students from other countries went, he said that he drove them crazy with the data. I mean, he said, where are you from? Oh, yes, well, then tell me about the inflation in your place. He began to ask everything. And he said, where did you get the data from? I mean, the guy was a fanatic with the data, an obsession that he inherited. The data first. I mean, before making a reference like that, please, let's say one has to check the data. But of course, in the romantic socialist world, the data doesn't count. Not in the case of the Keynesians either. So now we are in condition. The C, the 4, institution of capitalism, which is the division of labor, and that this is also linked, this social cooperation, and this is extremely important. If there is someone who has me absolutely annoying with the red, and the truth is that he has me very annoying, almost that in some part of my body, they would reach a gram and I could kick it. Then I am trying to maintain the composition, as you will see. Thank you. Between the neutral Spanish and my slangs, I'm almost crushed. I am going to think that it is the state, so I am going to escape. So, not for you. So, what is the point? The point is, systematically, the socialists accuse us of saying something like the fly theory. So, the first question that I always ask you, and you say that the liberals advocate for the fly theory, I ask you to please give me a textual quote where liberal thinkers talk about the flow theory. I mean, have you ever saw that stupidity thinking that, for example, Steve Jobs is or no, Bill Gates are in flow of IBM? This is a stupidity. The company that is doing well because they don't spill anything. I mean, how are you going to do something that is against the essence of what we defend ourselves? That is for them. So, what is the point? The point is to understand these two institutions, the division of work and social cooperation. The division of work. This was already in Adam Smith. So, this phrase symbol, I don't know if these debates, if you have them, yes, which is, for example, closing the economy. So, one says, well, closing the economy is good. So, well, we close the economy in Argentina. Well, but the truth is that if it is good, we close it in Buenos Aires. The truth is that if it is so good, we close it, I don't know, in a federal capital. If it is so good, we close it in Palimao, which is the neighborhood where I work. And if it is so good, the truth is, if it is so good with that argument, we close it. So it happens that now, let's say, I have to take care of making my shoes, my pants, my shirt, my tie. I'm going to have a shitty life. So the division of work has to deal with that, right? I say that one specializes. So if he's good at making shoes, and I am good at making food, let's discover that he can make better shoes. I mean, today you're the owner of the shoe store. What's your name? Nika Ishimeka. So you are going to dedicate yourself to making shoes. I'm going to dedicate myself to making food. And we are going to have food of better quality and shoes of better quality both. Imagine, let's say, a poor, look how fabulous all this is. What is another criticism that makes us socialists? No, because he seems that they are all the same. No, the opposite. We just celebrate the difference. Thank God we are all different. So he dedicates himself to making shoes. I dedicate myself to making food. He dedicates himself to making shirts, right? And so, let's say, the great diversity produces more goods of better quality in which we all benefit, right? In fact, this generates a process of social cooperation, because I could hate Nico. But do you know what the problem is? I am going to start walking, and I am going to pinch my feet. I am going to have a bad time. So what I am going to try is to seduce Nico, so that he buys my food, and I can do what? Chase. I mean, the market is a process of social cooperation. You are only going to be successful in so-and-so, that you can serve the neighbor with goods of better quality at a better price. I mean, the guy who is successful in capitalism is a social benefactor. I mean, far from being questioned, they should walk him in Andes. I mean, if a guy has a huge fortune, that guy should walk him in Andes as the hero of society. He is the champion of the benefactors, and yet they chase them. Back in Argentina, they say, he must have done something. Sure, but it is obvious that they think like that, because they say that the thief creates the whole world in the same condition. And who is going to be a politician more than a thief if he is financed with a captive source of income called taxes, which are a robbery? I always tell this example to describe that taxes are a robbery. A person walks, a vulgar thief comes, which in the Portanian terminology means a thief. Then he steals everything and leaves it literally in a fake costume. So, I mean, the question is, at 15 minutes, will the thief return? He says, no, look, I made a mistake. Take it, I'll return something. No, not even sticks. Well, the politician is ethically and morally worse than a vulgar thief, one faced with the cost of being hit, or whatever. And it is also random. Take into account how much money he lost from a vulgar thief, and how much he lost from the tax throughout the year. If those people are financed by stealing, it is logical that they will think that everyone who is doing well is stealing, because it is in their essence, basically, like, the division of labor and social cooperation as a whole have interests. The and social cooperation as a mechanism of success. And so, always, the red light appears saying that there are people who were not rewarded with any virtue, and then they're going to starve to death. Those what the anarcho-capitalists call the law of association of Ricardo. Let's say that it is what develops when, in the model of trade, develops the relative advantage. That is, even when there is a person, let's say in the case of my shoemaker, he was better. Nico's better than me, not only by producing shoes, but also by producing food. Just what Ricardo realizes, look, Nico is going to do the math, and he is going to realize that it is probably more convenient for him to dedicate himself to producing shoes and for him to produce food. Therefore, in the markets, there is room for everyone. If there is no room for everyone, it is because the state got in the way. Every time they detect a problem, see not crush the problem in the market, go and look first. If there is no state intervention, because surely the origin of all evils is linked to the presence of that nefarious entity called the state. In fact, look at what things are when one talks about informal markets or black markets. When you have a black market in general, the price in the black market, as they run a lot of risks and a lot of problems, is usually higher than in the white market. To put it in some way, look at how crazy the tax bash in Argentina will be, that those who are in the black market are cheaper. No, he laughs, but it is real. I know it seems that I'm kidding you, but believe me that it is true. That is, we reach a level of stupidity. That is, we have 101 taxes today. The other day, a congressman, almost in the category of subnormal, is in a battle, always attacking liberals because, of course, we bother them. No, it was not that. Schilfer was the stupid Firmino Iglesias. So he has a whole crusade against the liberal OTs. That is, we put OTs. He tries to stigmatize us. That is, he uses the resources of the state to persecute us. A beauty. No, the head of the cabinet does the same. Because let's say he sent one of theirs who was in the Ministry of Economy. He wrote a note attacking a colleague of mine, he neoliberal, that say, his name is Jose Luis Isper, and the head of the cabinet celebrated it. That is a crazy thing, that an official chases a citizen standing, and the head of the cabinet celebrates it. That is the state of situation of Argentina today. But the important thing is that in the market there is room for everyone. That is the problem, is the state. That is, when you find something wrong, it is because the state got in the way. That is, you always have to look there, not the other way around. And I can assure you that you are going to, let's say, be surprised how many times this works, tacitly. So here we already have, what are the institutions of capitalism? Busts. The red always come with that. Nordics. And go on with the Nordics. This, let's say, once I was on TV and I was arguing with a socialist deputy named Victoria Danda Hans. Then the interesting thing is that I stopped talking about the Nordics. So I tell her, sure you love the case of Sweden, right? So what was the problem? I think that, as Argentinian, is also characterized by having politicians extremely thieves. No, more or less thieves. I mean, the politician is already a garbage in itself. I say in Argentina, we are the best. In no one beats us. I mean, there we have perfected the order theft like no one. Sigh. Of course, then, they, for example, look at the old Sweden, they forget that the Swedish welfare state at the end of the 80s broke down when it had that tax pressure around 75%. But of course, they masturbate looking at the tax pressure of 75% and saying 75%, 75%, 75%. So they never found out that, as he broke down, they began to make pro-market reforms. And today, for example, the tax pressure in Sweden is 40%. The tax pressure for which it is blank in Argentina is 70%. I say for you to give more or less an idea. I say, apart from the 101 taxes, we have 69,000 regulations. I always tell the case of a friend of mine who has a refrigerator truck. So, for example, he told me that, for example, in the time when the wall of shame existed to go from capitalist Germany to the dark, he had to have 4 permits. And he has to go, let's say, 7 blocks, that is 700 meters, from the federal capital to where he has the refrigerator truck to the province of Buenos Aires. He needs 22. I mean, that's all nonsense. Until now, the anecdote was up to here. But now I have any part of the anecdote that is fabulous. It happens that one of the drivers who make these free transfers is robbed. What did the driver do? He hacked the folder. I mean, he hacked the folder with the permits. I mean, he didn't care that they took the truck, the content. Nothing, he hacked the folder. Why? Because he suddenly, in a week, would be able to make a truck again, and you will be able to continue working. Instead, if you run out of permits, you are half a year standing. And on top of that, you have to be decorating everyone when you don't have a generation. I mean, it's impressive. Look at how, let's say, he responds, he grabs the folder. I mean, to it, because then one looks at the tax pressure, it's obscene. But the regulations are worse, it seems. So let's see how the Nordics are. Let's see, Denmark, 3 in daring business, 8 in Norway, 10 in Sweden, Argentina, 144. Victory Dunda LTA, I would say Maradona, with a preview of AEA. And that, of course, is reflected in economic freedom. Look where it is, for example, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Norway, Argentina, 144, EEA. Not only there, because when you talk, for example, about the regulations in the labor market, I mean, nowhere in the world exists the air that exists in Argentina, in the labor market, with that verse of rights. Every 100 pesos that an employee receives in the pocket, the employer pays 165. The challenges they find in a country that punishes both work and Argentina. We are the champions of social justice, and we punish the workers. One thing, the Argentine case, is quite interesting. I mean, I say contradictions. I don't come back in 3 years. I mean, if I start counting. But then, they're the pointers. And again, the Nordic colors, right? They don't have regulation. There's no indemnization in Norway, in Denmark, in Sweden, Finland. Do you realize? It's all a farce. The Nordics, I mean, they got out of the situation they were in because they started to turn to the market. In fact, one of the things that I suggested to this lady, because she is married now, I told her, in fact, if you get to know how education works, you run away. Why? Because it works with vouchers, of course. But in Argentina, the other day, my partner Giacomini published a tweet about the vouchers, and someone said, I don't know how it works, but I'm against it. Well, of course, you think this is the case of an idiot Antwisser. I mean, this is the attitude, let's say, of the University of Buenos Aires too. I mean, why? Because the universities in Argentina became centers of Marxist indoctrination. I mean, you, for example, go to the University of Buenos Aires, and there's only one liberal course. It's History of Economic Thought Roman II, which is also optional, and it's on a shitty schedule. He says, no, we have amplitude of criterion. What amplitude of criterion? Do you want to have fun? The director of Cara is called Andres Lupes. We often tweet about him. If you want, you see what he says. They're epic, the things he says, and the things we answer. So, of course, what happens? First, look at these paradoxes, because they always talk about the struggle against monopolies and the disloyal competition and all that. The thing is that we adhere to the competition, but they are not. They are the vandals, but they take advantage of the monopoly of monetary emission, of the monopoly of violence. And look at education. If I have one that doesn't have registration, is competing illegally because there is no such thing as a free lunch. There is nothing free. That is to say, the education that they believe is free, someone is paying for it. They are just the ones who stay out. But if by any chance, a person who does not have resources and wants to study and makes the effort is condemned to be indoctrinated in a system that adores the religion of the state. And that, I'm going to tell you something, is not only corrected with vouchers, but also by deregulating the contents. Because if not, let's say, you can have vouchers, you can put competitions, you can put them to compete freely, and everyone with that voucher will decide which institution they go to. But if the state continues deregulating the contents, we are still screwed. Because what is it going to generate? It is going to generate contents that are functional to the religion of the state. I mean, let's say, I think that, let's say, it is easier to find an elephant, a violet color orange box, flying 500 meters, than an economist, not Keynesian from a public institution, of course. And why are they Keynesian? Because the general garbage of 1936 was a pamphlet written for Messianic, dirty and corrupt politicians. So, let's say, where the virtue was the expense, not the savings. Yes, that I already read in the subtitles. So the point is the following. Let's see. Let's say they are socialists, and it happens that they are among the best levels of respect of property rights. Enough of the fallacy of socialism. Recently, a conference started circulating through the networks in Harvard. The First Minister of Denmark, he says enough for the fact that we are socialist, we are capitalists, but the socialist South. Look, it looks like the Macri government, so much needed to show its success, and they are turning it around and grabbing it. So let's say this is the same. Well, the Macri government is a little bit, I don't know, what is it? It's nothing hit the head. So what we have here is an overwhelming evidence in favor as an economy of the market, of the economy, of free enterprise, or as they baptized us, capitalism. Because let's say the definition of capitalism, let's say, was made by the socialists to denigrate us. It's like at say, as or no, the best fit is called Mokokiri. But of course, it's so good that even when it's called Mokokiri, it keeps crushing it. So, what do they take refuge in? It's then reality. Capitalism is deeply unequal. And here, let's say, it's where I believe that the socialists managed to start harder on society and managed to monopolize the discourse. They all, the good people, and we are the bad people. So, basically, what we're going to show is that in reality they are liars, and the only good ones are us. The first thing to understand is, where does all this exploitation and inequality come from? Where is the origin? Where is the origin? Where is the origin? And the origin is the problem of the theory of value. Which is the theory of value work? I mean, because in order to assist these issues, you have to understand the theory of distribution. But to get to a good theory of distribution, you have to first have a good theory of value. And the problem is that if you have a bad theory of value, you have problems. So the problem that the socialists have is that they don't have a good theory of value because they were precisely on the theory of weak value. I mean, the value of things is a theory of objective value that basically consists of adding costs. Where would the cost associated with the hours of work be? So, I suppose you have to buy a house, and you saw that now those houses that are made with 3D printers have appeared, and you have a house of 200 square meters in a very short time. Imagine that you want to make another one with sticks that serve the phosphors. I don't know if phosphors are called phosphors here, with phosphors. Of course, I mean, if you take a stick of phosphorus, it lasts a huge amount of hours. The other one takes 10 hours. I mean, why would they pay more? According to this ridiculous theory, a stick of phosphorus, which is a stupidity of the size of a house, literally. That apart from that, I suggest you see the things that are being done with 3D printers, the houses they make. I mean, they are truly spectacular. I easily tell this. I deal with an example that is, suppose that I arrive at a place and I see that in the society there is no wine. So I say, there is no wine. Look at what I just discovered. So what do? I buy the grape. I buy the bottle. I buy the cork. I buy the label. And if I am alone, then I charge a huge margin. And I come here with a bottle to the huge margin. I ask you to be educated, well-mannered, and of one. Suppose that we are in an abstemious society. What can I do with the bottles of wine? There is the producer of Vaseline.
Allá está feliz el productor de vaselina.
I mean, if you don't have a loss, there is nothing. There is nothing. I mean, did you see that? They say, oh, well, because you have the monopoly, and I give you the monopoly, because you have the monopoly, and I give you the monopoly by selling cubes in Antarctica. I mean, it's useless. So, what you have to understand is that the theory of value is wrong. And this is not less, because from there comes also the theory of exploitation. I mean, prices would come determined by the amount of hours of work you have. Everything should be exhausted in paying the salaries. So where is the benefit? And what would it be? The surplus value. Of course, let's say there is no, because all the value derives from work, and there then appears exploitation. Now, this theory of exploitation is interesting, isn't it? I mean, because if there is something that characterized the technological progress at the last 200 years made by businessmen, it was that it always says work. I mean, then to maintain this theory, we have to assume that businessmen are stupid, that they don't want to exploit someone. They have the advantage of exploiting someone, and they don't do it. So they are not so bad, if it was in that case. But they realize that it is stupid. There's someone who has a benefit, is going to throw him out. I mean, look how stupid is the world of the theory of value of work that adds costs. If that were the case, there would be no breaks. And in total, I can charge the cost. Look at the stupidity in which this theory falls if you think about the equalization of profits. It means that everyone has the same amount of work, which is stupid. I mean, if there is something that characterizes the different sectors that have different tactical relations of capital and work. So what are we talking about? We're talking about something there is truly stupid. I mean, not only does it go wrong, it is pathetic and it goes against the facts, it goes against human nature. Well, nothing more violent and wild than wanting the equality of all people when we are naturally different. Imagine, let's say, I call the socialists the short penis club. I mean, who's going to cry for the average penis? The one who has it small. The one who has it big is not going to ask for amputation. So what we are really facing a ridiculous theory. So let's say, why continue to embrace this ridiculousness? And besides, it generates truly stupid results. Because all the places where it was applied was a failure, in the economic, in the social, and in the cultural. And besides, it took the lives of more than 100 million human beings. So it is also a way made a system. So the pointers that they start from this theory. So the problem is already there. I mean, they are unable to discuss because they can't even explain it. On the other hand, there is a theory of subjective value that appears with Menje in the principles of political economy. It appears with Bauer. It appears with Evans, where the prices are given by preferences and scarcity. That combination is what determines the value, and associated with that theory of value. You remember the discussion about the paradox of diamonds, water, and all that kind of things. Associated with that, it also appears something very interesting, that pharmacies, later he calls pharmacies, excuse me, he calls in Menger's principle of imputation, which is in the Menger's book that I just mentioned, which are the prices that determine the costs, and not the costs that determine the prices. I mean, the example of wine is very important for this. And why is this important? Because that is what determines the remuneration of the factors, and the remuneration of the factors is determined by what is called, suppose, the work. The work is determined by the value of the marginal product at the work. What is the value of the marginal products of the work? It is the marginal products of the work that is linked to productivity, which is how much a unit of work is produced. And the value means that it is multiplied by the price. That is, the remuneration of the factors includes preferences, scarcity, and productivity. That is, if he managed to put in a product, which is a goal in the middle of the field, and besides they are productive, they are filled with money. That is, again, the one he manages to serve the neighbor with better quality or better price is wealthy. For example, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, which are clearly not IBM spells. And that is what determines the remuneration of the factors. Therefore, the distribution of income has to do with the way in which you manage to satisfy your neighbor with the products that you sell and their productivity. So, basically, that is the distribution of income. Therefore, when we are talking about redistributing of income, because someone happened to look at a number and consider that it was unfair, what we have to understand is that that is a violent act. Redistribution is to distribute with the market originally distributed voluntarily. Here's what counts is not the photo that someone looks at. The what counts is the process that generated it. So, if the exchanges that took place were all voluntary, each one got what he wanted. There's nothing else today. That is why I always tell the case, and I am going to give you an example. Suppose that we go to Spain, and there is a little boy who plays football. His name is Messi. Great. Messi is impossible. I'm not going to defend him. What? Messi's. So, the point is the following. Everyone realizes that if they have Messi, they are going to win everything. So everyone starts a push for having Messi. What does Messi do? He discovers that everyone wants to hire him. So, what is he going to do? He is going to go with the one who pays more. In fact, he makes a proposal and says, I want the one who pays me the equivalent to the monthly entry sales. So, that is the equivalent of 2 stadiums. So, there has to be some group of fans who are willing to pay twice for the entry for what? To have Messi. They exist. They are called Catalans, and they take him to Barcelona. The league starts. Barcelona hits everyone with a ball, but it is a robbery. Everything is tremendous. They waste everyone. Those from Madrid pass the ball to them, back and forth, and that is when Barcelona wins the league. In fact, Catalans go and celebrate in less than small spaces in Madrid in front of the Madridistas, a truly dantesque party. But it ends that in generated distribution. So Messi appears deeply rich. Then the directors and players of Barcelona come. Then all the Spaniards come, except the Catalans, and finally the Catalans. Question: could someone say that a distribution of the entry is unfair? If all the exchanges were voluntary, if everyone got what they were looking for, who the hell is a guy to come and say, now, because this society is deeply unfair because Messi wins more than the one below, did the ones below not get what they were looking for? That was, let's say, enjoying Barcelona as a champion and laughing at the Madridistas in the face and all that. What fault do we have that the national accounts cannot capture that? It is a problem of perception. Who told them that is unfair? Who gave you the power to saying that you are the owner of the finger that determines that is unfair? Who are you? But then I say, because that is the problem of the socialists, the fatal conceit that Hayek was talking about. Now let's go to another society. Suppose I take a bus, a public transport. What is it called?
¿cómo se llama?
A bus,
Un micro.
the
La
bus,
micro. Ok, ¿y cómo se...? Y voy
and I go up to the bus
a la micro
with
con
Michelle
Michelle
Bachelet.
Bachelet.
Well, let's lower the tone.
Bueno, vamos
I
a
go up
bajar
with
el tono.
Christina.
Sigo con Cristina.
Be careful where you go
Cuidado
down.
donde baja, tenga
Have
los
your
bolsillos
pockets. To keep it without a problem.
Para mantenerlo
I'm going to
seguro,
say that I
decir
travel
que
with
voy con
Christina.
Entonces,
Then I go up
subo
with
con Cristina
Christina to the bus,
a la micro
and obviously,
y obviamente
Christina
Cristina
sits
se
on my
sienta a mi
left.
izquierda.
There is also a
En el
place
lugar
on
de
the
la
right.
derecha, recuerden que soy
Remember
libertario.
that I am a libertarian. Then
Entonces,
a man enters
entra un señor
who was
que
boasting
estaba
his
buscando
pockets
los bolsillos de dinero.
and running away on the side.
No
It doesn't
importa,
matter
digamos, que ese hombre
that
iba
that
con
man
esa
was
plata
going with that
para
money
pagar la
to
operación
pay
de
for the
los
operation of the children's eyes.
se quedaba sin
Otherwise, he would be blamed.
es un detalle
That
menor.
doesn't matter. It's a minor detail.
Pero esa
But that situation of that man with so much money in his pockets, Christina, we called them tremendously violent. It seemed deeply unfair. Look at all the money that that man has. And all the others, we are all sickers. Then he takes a baseball bat. There has these, micro. Then he goes with the bat and says to him, either you give me all your money or I break your head. Then the man, the only way to save the children's eyes is by working. So if he breaks his head, he has no money and no possibility to save the children's eyes. He has to give them the money. And assuming that Christina is not going to spend it on shoes, some that have red soles, but she makes them paint in black and pays double, so that nobody finds out that they are the red soles, that she is not going to spend it on a purse, that she is not going to buy hotels, that she is not going to give it to her daughter to put it in a safe. Let's say that she defended the weight so much, but the safe was full of dollars. Those inconsistencies, progressives. So, she redistributes equally, and now everyone in the collective has the same amount of money. He asks, could someone saying that this second society is fairer than the first? If the exchanges were not voluntary, they were violent. Now, of course, if you ask those he received, we are barbarous. And of course, if you are going to ask the beneficiary of this sure, go and ask the one who broke the head of a palazzo. So basically, what counts here is whether the exchanges are not voluntary. If the exchanges are not voluntary, they are a robbery. They are a robbery. That is, redistribution of income is of robbery. There is nothing more unfair than social justice, because it is based on the robbery and on the unequal treatment under the law. Therefore, social justice is unfair. It is nefarious. And the reality is there. Capitalism, what does it do? It rewards in the best way the one who does the most for society. That is, capitalism is a fair system. Suppose you have two people. One has 100, the other has 0. Now, it happens that the stupid egalitarian will come and say, no, you have to give 50 to one to give 50 to the other. Face that process spoke of the poor sense of politicians. That saying, in the middle you can buy the shoes of the red sole, paint them black, buy the purse, buy the hotels. But if that still happened, the problem is that the one who has 100, how was he? He was working and the other was scratching. That is with which it is deeply unfair, that of redistributing income. Especially, let's say, not only that, when you start applying that mechanism, one of the things that will happen is that those who produce will not want to produce, because if they cannot appropriate the fruit of their work, then they will not want to work. We in Argentina are 8 million the idiots who work and pay 22 million checks. That's why we fell. That is, in a short time, they are going to be a country with an exit to both oceans. Be careful not to appear anyone that want to rescue drowned and shoot their lives. You know that with the technological progress, wonderful things can be done. For example, did you know that a mammoth can be brought to the Earth? They found remains of DNA of a mammoth that was frozen, so they could bring to Earth. Already the cost is calculated. The University of the Singularity has calculated it, and it has a lot in common with the African elephant, so they could implant it in an African elephant, female, and when the problem is where the hell they put the mammoth. It is an ethical problem now, but it is a problem that cannot be done. So I say, you do not laugh, because it is not a thing that a Michel appears he wants to play Chacasto in race, let's say populists. I only comment, like this one passing. So I say, with which, in addition, the system is fair. Retribute better to who? The one who works better, the one who strives. Yes, the one who saves the neighbor, who provides better quality, a better price. And also has luck, the one who has luck. Grabs the guy, discovers something, and hit him by chance. The good luck is also part of the discovery process, because the discovery process has to do with insight. You fall into a well and want to get out of the well. Face what has to happen is that they want to get out. Find one. Now, if you want to get out, perhaps if you find wood, nails, you have to climb a ladder. If you don't want to get out, you won't find anything. And second, you may want to get out, you may find those things, and climb the ladder and get out. And you may also have bad luck, because there's nothing and you die like a rat. That's it, it's over. It's part of life. But it's a great Argentine golfer called David who said, it's true, unlucky. I realize that the more I train, the luckier I am. So the argument of luck is, don't bet on that. Because if I bet on the second error, it's my turn, not yours. Go and work. So let's see what happens now with the distribution of income. There's so much mess with the distribution. Let's see what happens. As I said, the distribution of income follows the pattern of a law, where the fashion, the value that's repeated the most, is at the non-right of the average. So let's see if there are things that make me buzz. So let's see. The mind who has the most difficult job in the world is my psychologist. He tells me to go there and tell him about those things. Besides, don't be a thing. Who wants to fuck me up? So let's see. Best. If you notice, a distribution of income was very concentrated in the 60s. In the 80s, it was more equal, and in the 2000s, much more equal. You can see that with the gene that's going down as a prostitute garment. Fucking pants. Fucking pants. But now, let's say, we're going to feed the rates, and we're going to amplify the photo so that it looks worse, the 2000s. So look, for example, we make an enlargement of the photo of the year 2000, and we measure it in 2003, and look how ugly it looks. It looks very unequal, doesn't it? Look how it was in 2011. There's this. LTA. That is to say, as the convergence is being fulfilled, the distribution of income in other countries is becoming more equal, and this capitalism and the free market advance, and everyone is getting better. The inequality will also disappear, but keeping in mind that, in reality, it's not something bad. It's something good because, in the end, it has to do with the mechanism under which the economic system works. If for some reason the preferences of people, of individuals, are modified from good to good B, what's going to happen? Is the price of grade B going up? And is the price of good going down? The companies that are in have to pay. And what about the price of B? What about the price of B? The price of beta is in turn a attractor. It's an attractor of what? And their profit. So let's say the profit is good. Why? Because what it's showing is, first, it's the success serving the next, but also it's a mechanism to take the resources from the inefficient place, the one that has to go bankrupt, the buried man, the drug producer, all that corrupt, and the things related to life. So, in that context, the profit to what? Leads to redistributing the income to where society most requires for the goods. So, why does populist logic work so well? Thanks to this nefarious being, named for Frido Pareto, who not only invented this crap, the optimal Pareto, which we already saw that in a dynamic way, it's an aberration, but he was also Mussolini's advisor. No, don't fuck with me, really. And he basically discovered the format of distribution of income. That is, this Quakai or the normal log. And that was easy in all countries. The logic of populism is that if between 70% and 80% of people have a lower income than the average income, the best political income, that is, that one is going to that one is going to take power for what? To take away the rich, to give to the poor. Why? Because they are talking between 70% and 80% of the population. In Argentina, there is a man named Dr. Higa Morales, also known as the storyteller, also known as the progressive, that has an apartment in front of the Metropolitan of New York, the same one that has a lecture location in the Metropolitan of New York, and they didn't tell me because I saw it. The difference is that I went to the Met with Christina. But apart from that, well, he could also say that it is his and mine too. So the interesting thing about all this is that populist logic. He described it perfectly. He said, if it weren't for the hegemonic means, Christina would have to win with 75% of the votes. Of course, give it some water. I mean, they knew well what they were doing, that of fermenting society. And talking about redistribution of income, clearly they were pointing to 70, 75, 80% of the population. So with this story, goes well, it is an electoral machine that can never be lost. Look at this. In fact, there are many people who in Argentina saying, no, but during the quarrel, we were better. And of course, obviously, but I'll give you an example. Suppose you have an apartment, then you go with that apartment to the bank. You ask for a mortgage, you mortgage your apartment, and you go with the money in your hand, and you use the money to go to fun in Europe. And you go until the candles don't burn, and you end up having a great time. In the middle, obviously, they lost their jobs, they were paying the bills, everything, but at one point, they lost money. When they come back, they don't have work. They don't have money. What's going to happen? They will be able to pay the bank. And when they can't pay the bank, what will the bank do? I mean, it would have to be very stupid to realize, yes, before we were better. Yes, of course, you are eating the capital. If you eat the capital, what's going to happen is that is, you lost your job, and now you don't have to pay the bill, and you're going to stay on the street. The case of populism is even worse, because you, if you get that job, nobody forced you. They did it voluntarily. And part of life is to make mistakes. That's why the Austrians say that the market is a process of discovery. Did you see the supply and demand curves? For the new classical, come back po in the histobalance. Not us, we're looking, and we're discovering. In a moment we arrive. Surely for the moment we arrive, something happened in the middle, and the conditions change. And it's always like that. But the point is that at least you did it with your own will and used your own resources. Now imagine the case where you gave your apartment to the mortgage and the one who left Europe was another one. How are you going to be super hot? I mean, what redistribution of income? I mean, you're stealing from me. That's what people have. It's a robbery. And on top of that, the one who lived a crazy life internalizes the cost. Besides, it's nothing easier than being generous with someone else's money. Buff produced the same at the level of generosity that a person can show when the account is paid by someone else. Or, as I said in a TV show, with an alien ass, we're all whores. Hans. Associated with this, there's also Milton Friedman's vision, which was not invented by Friedman, because this was already in John Stuart Mill. And there are societies that put equality above freedom, don't get anything from both. Instead, those societies that put freedom above equality get a lot from both. Why? Because when he put equality above freedom, he become a swindler society. See one example, Argentina. Argentina, the highest GDP in 1895 with ideas of obeying after being a barbaric country during the first 30-40 years of the 20th century, oscillating between the fifth position, a porta and out, but always there, a wild populist movement. Today, Argentina is number 60 in the ranking at GDP per capita. And so then, I fear that my children will envy the well-being of Somalia, says a friend of mine. So, here what matters is the issue. The equality that liberalism proposes is equality before the law. That is, there's nothing wilder than trying to impose equality of results, because we are all naturally different. And if we wanted all of us to be the same, let's say, first of all, it would be an inhuman world. All the same, imagine. It's something grey, uniform, disgusting, without creativity. So, also it's deeply wild, because then if the average is 1.70, well then, since I can't make those who are small taller, the others, that is, it's wild. It's a beast. And apart, let's say, wanting to equalize this, what it does is to violate the division of work with which it violates social cooperation, not at all. There are societies that are free and that are open to capitalism. Yes, they are peaceful because, as Bashiat said, where does commerce come in? Where the bullets come in? Again, I can hate him, but I need him to be better. I have no choice but to treat him well. My success lied in him being well. So that's a system that promotes peace. On the other hand, I say, how are the socialists? They are all resentful. They think they have right. Of course, if the total account is paid by another, I have the right to this. You have no right to anything, because someone has to pay. There are only three rights. The right to life, the right to property, which is to be the owner of the fruit of your work, and the right to freedom. Any other right implies that someone has to pay, and if someone has to pay, let's say, it's not that we are owing for charity, because charity is not complete. If I have to cut the state in the middle, that's a robbery. It's a system that promotes envy, hatred, resentment, the unequal treatment against the law. The best example has to do with the distribution of income and the progressive taxes. The more successful you are in capitalism, because you work better for the welfare of society, and you have greater profits. What did the socialists say? That you have to charge more taxes, taxes that are also larger proportionally. It implies an unequal treatment. Under the law, it's not only a robbery, but it also implies treating people differently. Under the law, it's crazy. Someone is in favor of treating people unequally under the law, but it's a shooting. No one in their court can sustain this. If they truly understood the moral values of socialism. So guys, you are facing two sets of values. The values of capitalism. What are the values of capitalism? Their institutions, private property, free markets, competition, free entry and exit, social cooperation, division of labor, saving, let's say serving the neighbor, with a better quality or better price. Alternatively, think about it this way, that's capitalism. And what's on the other side? Envy, hatred, resentment, robbery, the unequal treatment under the law, and especially murder, because that shitty system was only applied by violence, and it took the lives of more than 100 million human beings. And as if all this were not enough, we are aesthetically superior.